Good Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. Browns kind of in that dead period. They'll have some workouts coming up, the off-season, getting ready for the draft. I'm sure we'll hear about an extension for Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry coming up in a little bit. Some good news, Deshaun Watson back throwing in Los Angeles with his quarterback coach, Quincy Avery. This from both of their Unplugged podcast. Watson, an update on where he is with that injury rehab.
Situation good, man. We're in a great spot, right where we need to be, right on track. We got, plenty of time to wrap up the throwing sessions and things like that, but everything been going pretty smooth, man. So, along with I'm feeling well and the doctors and the PTs and everyone on the same page, we are in a good spot.
Yeah, it was cool to see Kev kind of start talking about, I think at the head coaches meeting, he came out and said, that you were throwing, that things are going smooth. You feel like that, though? You feel like your shoulder's in a good spot, throwing wise?
Yeah, most definitely. We're in the early stages too. You know what I'm saying? So been a week, 2 weeks, the new phase, as we call it, pretty much call it in the PT rehabbing world, is the performance, rehab. So, we don't move past the recovery. We don't move past the strength kind of base. And now we're in the performance where we're getting ready to kind of throw the receivers and things like that. So, we're in a good spot, man. And like I said before, it's just one day at a time. That's all we can do.
So welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com on the internet. Scott, it's as good a news as you could hope for at this point in time. Performance means he's going out and doing the things he needs to do as a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, that's the message the Browns have had for the last couple of months since the season ended. Now, obviously, a big milestone is Deshaun Watson getting out there and throwing. So the fact that he says that went well, I think is a positive. I think the Browns are going to be careful with him, and I don't know how much he's going to throw when, OTAs get here in May. That's, another month and a half away. We'll have to see then. But as long as he's feeling good, that's a huge step.
Yeah, and he is throwing the football. Again, it's not, it's not ramped up, but, the one thing is you can't get to where he needs to go until you start throwing a football around.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I don't know exactly what I expected. I kind of thought when he started throwing, we'd see all these videos on Instagram and the ball would be flying all over the place. And that's obviously unrealistic. It's baby steps. You're coming back from a big surgery. It's in your shoulder, which obviously is important when you're a quarterback. So I'm sure he's out there. I'm sure it's light throwing to begin with. And then he'll, like I said, ramp up and it'll gradually get more strenuous. And there's a long time here, right? There's 5+ months until the season starts. I think the goal would be that he's back to 100% by training camp. And that's, almost 4 months away. So there's a lot of time here. This is a huge step, the throwing, and then it's just got to continue to progress in a positive manner.
So this one's from the Bleacher Report. Panic meter for every team's quarterback situation ahead of the 2024 NFL Draft. Browns low. There's a decent chance Deshaun Watson never gets back to where he was at the start of the decade in Houston, but the Browns are contractually married to him for several more years, so this has to remain low. All that's true, but I get the sense the Browns would do that trade again. Do you get that same sense?
That's a great question, Dave. I know that publicly they would say they would. I have doubts myself. I kind of look around the league and you see how teams have been able to get quarterbacks in the last couple of years without having to give up 5 draft picks, including 3 first-rounders, without having to pay $230 million. Probably not to the, I'm sure people would say not to the caliber of Deshaun Watson, which is accurate. But he hasn't been on the field much in 2 years. So I think it's an interesting discussion. And I'd like to get, a little truth serum for Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam and Kevin Stefanski, see what they would have to say. But they're still optimistic. There's no doubt about that. And I believe them when they talk optimistically about Watson. and how they feel. He showed them a lot in that Baltimore game, what, that potential can be, how good this team can be with Watson playing really well. So I believe all that. The panic thing's interesting because I think just because you're tied to him doesn't mean there's low panic. If things go badly early in the season, I think the panic meter could be high. I guess it depends if you're the fans or the Browns. If you're talking about the Browns, I don't think there is panic with Watson yet. I think outsiders probably view that differently.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, don't get me wrong, there's pressure on him. He has to go out and perform this year. But I get the sense that the Browns think that he will and are putting things around him to help him perform.
No, there's no doubt. And I do think, I'm sure we've talked about it before, but I think it's worth repeating is, we kind of view this as a 5-year thing with Deshaun Watson because that's what his contract is. But Andrew Berry says it, and I have no reason to question him. I think he means it, that the organization views it as longer term than that. So if you take a 8-year view or a 10-year view, then 2 years is a lot less substantial, right? It's 20% or whatever that percentage would be, as opposed to all of a sudden, if it's only a 5-year commitment, it goes from 40% of his contract to 60% in this year. Why? Which is why this year feels so pivotal. But if things go well, then Watson will be here much longer, and the issues/struggles in years 1 and 2 would feel like they would be removed and maybe just a blip in his long tenure with the team.
Yeah, and the other thing would be, I think if the Browns were being, again, truth serum, suspension was longer than they thought it was going to be, and they had, the injuries last year. You couldn't get them on the field for 4 games in a row. So they really haven't gotten any of what they thought they were going to get.
Yeah, I mean that's the reality of it, right? Which is why I think fans are nervous. Which is why I think it's tough to give a fair grade to this trade, and it's hard to give a fair evaluation of Deshaun Watson. Now, I think we take a step back. It's the player's responsibility to be on the field. Injuries, is out of their control. The suspension wasn't out of his control, or what he did to get the suspension. The Browns knew it. They underestimated it. Last year was bad luck. The key is that the injuries don't continue, and there's not another suspension, right? So there's no reason to think there's going to be another suspension. We don't know about the injuries, and it's such a big factor. And once a player gets injury or misses time with injuries, you're always worried about that in the back of your head, and that's why the Browns need Watson to play all or most of the season to get past that.
Yeah, without question. This from Jack Duff, and it's really interesting. Players earning $10+ million a year in 2024, and this is by team. Browns have the most with 13. 49ers have 11. Eagles have 10. The least, Chargers, Bengals, and Lions with 4, and the Patriots with 3. Again, shows you the roster, and what that speaks to me is they're in win now mode. If you've got 13 guys making double-digit millions, you plan on winning.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting stat. That jumps out to me, everything you said. Jimmy Haslam's willingness to spend, right? Because you got to be willing to spend as an owner to have that kind of financial commitment to a lot of guys. You compare it with Cincinnati, they had 4 on that list, right? So, Cincinnati's got a good team, they got a good roster, but, the Browns down there, the owners, Mike Brown, doesn't have that kind of cash and isn't willing to spend like some of his counterparts, including the Haslams, are. So that's part of it. But the other thing that jumps out at me is the 3 teams on the list are Cleveland, San Francisco, and Philly. They're all really good teams, right? And the other 2, they've been to Super Bowls in the last couple of years, right? So I think it shows you that the Browns are poised to compete, and like you said, they're ready to win right now.
All right, this from your mailbag. I'm interesting. It's a very interesting question. Do you think the Browns will be able to keep all of their top 3 cornerbacks?
Yeah, that came from a good high school buddy of mine who lives in New York now, and I thought it was really interesting. I think for the short term, the answer is yes. I don't think they're in any hurry to trade anybody, right? In the it would be Greg Newsome, the second, right? He'd be the one to be traded. I don't think they're getting rid of Denzel Ward. He's a top, 5 corner. Martin Emerson Jr. has played too well in his first 2 years to think that the Browns would move on from him. So then it's Newsome, who I think has played pretty well. Played well, maybe not great. Had a tough game against Denver last year, but it's still been good. He's played in and out, outside and in the slot, which is difficult to do. So I don't think they're just going to give Newsome away. I think he'll be here. And I think he'll be here for next year, too, because the contract, this year it's only 2 point something, I think, million. And then if they pick up the fifth-year option, which I would expect them to do, it's like 13.7 for 2025. But then you have a decision to make because he would be up for an extension. Martin Emerson Jr. would be done with his rookie contract. And I just don't think you can pay 3 corners $20 million a year. I just don't think it just doesn't fit in any kind of salary structure, any kind of salary cap structure. So I think they'll have to make a decision, but I don't think they'll make that decision until after 2025. Now, if somebody came to with an offer on draft day and said, we'll give you a second and a fourth for Newsome, maybe they do that. If they offered the right guy at the right position, maybe they would trade Newsome. But I just don't think there's any pressing reason to do that, and they really value corners. So I think they'll hang on to the threesome as long as they can.
Yeah, there's no need to do it until, like you said, you got to pay 3 guys $20 million because of where they're at. All right, before we go to break, another one from your mailbag. Did the Browns hire Mike Vrabel at the behest of Kevin Stefanski or in spite of him? I don't see any way they did it in spite. I don't see any. I think people are reading way more into that. I think it says a lot about Kevin Stefanski that Vrabel's on his staff.
Yeah, I get it, right? I get the visual that this is a big name coach, huge reputation, big personality in Cleveland, all that. Has done really well in the league as a head coach. I get that visual, but I believe Kevin Stefanski when he says he reached out and said, "Hey." When Mike Vrabel did not get another head coaching job, he reached out and said, come to Cleveland. And it was a good fit for Vrabel. He had a relationship with Stefanski. He's got a relationship with Andrew Berry. It just made sense. And you see other head coaches do this kind of thing, right? If they get fired, they wind up back on the staff. I mean, Bill Belichick would do it with Josh McDaniels or whoever, right? It happens across the league. I think the dynamic's different because it's Vrabel. And because for whatever reason, even though he's won 2 Coach of the Years, I think people still consider Stefanski, this young coach, hasn't established himself, and maybe we just need to change that narrative because I think he has. He's going to get a big extension that he deserves, and he's been a 2-time Coach of the Year and taken this team to the playoffs twice.
Scott Petrak, the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yes, this is Richard calling from Canton, Ohio, and this is just how I feel. I think the Browns should bring back Kareem Hunt to match him with Chubb, Ford, Foreman, Hines, and Strong. Because if push comes to shove and Nick Chubb don't come back quick enough, we will have no choice but to go run him back by committee. And the most important, why did we re-sign Kate York? So hopefully he finds a place. Other than that, I don't think he's a good fit for Cleveland. That's just my opinion. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the 24th season. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I kind of like to, if you thought highly enough of the guy to draft him as high as you did, I don't see the problem with keeping him on the practice squad is you need a developmental kicker. Cade York is now your developmental kicker. Kareem Hunt, I just think that's kind of that ship has sailed for the Browns and Kareem Hunt. I think he wants a different opportunity.
Yeah, I'm with you especially on the Hunt thing. Talked to him right after the season. Certainly, that's the impression he gave. The Browns have moved on, right? They went and got Nakeem Hines. Hines, who, even if he's a third down back returner, he's still a running back. Dante Foreman is kind of the same back that Kareem Hunt is. So I think it would need to be extraordinary circumstances for Hunt to come back. And if he gets a chance somewhere else, I expect him to jump on it. It'll be interesting to see what kind of market there is. Obviously, nothing has happened for Kareem yet. I thought he showed last year he can still play at some level, and he said he was never healthy. I think he had the hernia issue, so I think he can still play in this league. So I'd like to see somebody give him a chance. As far as York, he's got a lot of potential, and that's why the Browns drafted him in the 4th round. And they don't like to give up on draft picks. If they have an evaluation on a player, they believe it, and they like to hang on to that. And I think that's especially true with the kicker, or especially valid with the kicker, because plenty of kickers struggle early, and then they figure it out. So, they tried to bring Cade York back last year on the practice squad. He chose to go to Tennessee. I think York now has been around a little bit. He was in Tennessee. He was with the Giants for a little bit. And says, hey, I liked it in Cleveland. Maybe that's the place I can kind of resurrect my career. So it'll be interesting to see if he's been humbled at all, because he's a guy that had a lot of confidence, a lot of ego. Maybe he'll be different mentally this year. Could he learn from Dustin Hopkins? I think there's a chance that could really benefit Cade York. And, yeah, they need a second kicker, at least for the offseason, a developmental guy, maybe keep on the practice squad. And York fits that bill to a T.
All right. I know you wrote about Nick Chubb's return from knee injury. Take us through that and what benchmarks, what the Browns are looking at there.
Yeah, it's just too early to tell, right? I mean, that's the crux of it. And, he's done some running, but he hasn't done NFL running, right? The load work, whatever you want to call it, agility drills, cutting. And he's going to start to do that in April. And Andrew Berry thought by the draft, which is, 3.5 weeks from now, that he would have a better idea. But really, that's when he'd start to have a better idea on when Chubb might be ready for the season. Is it going to be week 1? Is it later in the year? He'll really have a better idea by the end of minicamp. Not that Chubb will have practiced it all, because he won't. But he'll have worked out enough, he'll run enough, he'll have done enough drills that they have an idea. Okay, let's say it's July 1st. 2 months from now, is he going to be ready to go? Or is it more like 4 months from now? I think fans are desperate to find out if Chubb's going to be there week 1. I think that's still a long shot, but it's also too early to say one way or the other if he'll be available, that first week, that first month of the season.
And I know you've answered this in your mailbag. I'm curious as to your thoughts on it. Jerome Ford, what do you think the Browns think of him? They signed Himes, they signed Foreman. Are those necessarily bad things, or is it to supplement Ford, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's to supplement. I think Ford's an interesting case because he played well, right? He's kind of forced into a tough spot last year. Chubb gets hurt in week 2. All of a sudden, it's Jerome Ford's team. It's Jerome Ford's job to be that number 1 back. I thought he did pretty well, especially for a guy who didn't carry the ball hardly at all as a rookie. Wasn't perfect by any stretch, but I think there were plenty of positives there. So, we don't know how much Chubb's going to play this year, but this could be a pivotal year for Jerome Ford, right? If he starts the year and if he plays for 4 weeks before Chubb comes back, or whatever it is, if he winds up having to play much more than that because Chubb doesn't come back, you could learn a lot about Jerome Ford, and I think we'll get a much clearer sense if he is a true number 1 back in this league or if he's just a piece of a backfield rotation.
Do you think the things that he didn't do well are correctable? We saw a lot of negative plays. Are they correctable issues that can get him to not have, I think it was 16% of his things went for less than 2 yards?
That's a great question. And, I'm sure the Browns are hoping the change at running back running back coach helps, right? Going to Deuce Staley. They also have a new run game coordinator that they got from college. And I think they hope that those help Ford. Like, to me, there were two areas of concern with him. One, I keep remembering, especially the second half of last season, where he'd take these, wide handoffs of pitches, and it felt like he kept going wide, and never really cut up. And they led to big losses, like you mentioned. So maybe that's just coaching. Tell him to just put your foot in the ground and go. Pick a seam and go. And I think he can get better at that. I don't know how much of that is vision versus, okay, you just have to have the right mindset. Hey, this play isn't looking like we thought it would. Just stick your head in there. And then he's a big enough guy where I think he could be useful in short yardage and on the goal line. But they went to Kareem Hunt mostly in those situations. That's probably why they got Dante Foreman. He's that type of back too. So I think he could probably be better in that area. And I don't know why he hasn't gotten where, they trust him enough. And I don't know if that's something he can get better at or not.
Scott Petrak and I are going to step aside, take another quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll take a look. Browns roster, are there any glaring holes? What could they potentially add? Sports for CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also catch his work, brownzone.com, on the internet. Scott, when you look at this Browns roster as it stands now, is there anything left for the Browns to address in free agency or the draft? Do you think there's any glaring holes on it?
I don't. I think glaring would not be the adjective I would use at all. I think a lot of that was where the roster ended last season. I think the fact that they traded for Judy was big. You re-signed Zadarius Smith. You add add three guys at D-tackle, the moves at linebacker, right? Like, I feel like they're pretty set. Now, that doesn't mean they're perfect. We've talked about it before, Dave. I think there's a hole at number 2 tight end, and I might be alone on that, but I'm going to keep preaching it. I just think you need better insurance and a second receiving option behind David Njoku. Could you add? I think you need to get younger at the interior of the offensive line. Maybe another D tackle, maybe another linebacker. Like, there's places where you can pick and choose. But I definitely don't think there's a glaring need.
Yeah, it's more depth, and I'm, when you say younger, you need guys so that if these guys on one-year contracts decide there's a better deal out there, next season you're not in trouble. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. This one major move for each AFC team still to make, this from yardbarker.com. Browns, they say, sign another inside linebacker. Cleveland smartly added veteran Jordan Hicks, but signing a former first-round pick Devin Bush is a head-scratcher after he had just 37 tackles with the Seahawks last season. Scott, everybody that keeps pointing to linebacker, the Browns only want to play 2 most. They want to get to 2, and they want to get out of base and get to 2 linebackers. They want to get to nickel and play more of their safeties and DBs. I guess if it's a younger linebacker, I can see it. I kind of like the signing of Bush. I view Bush as a high upside guy. It's a former guy that was like the 10th or 12th pick in the first round. And I know he's coming off an injury, but Jim Schwartz wanted him. I'm guessing he has a role for him.
Yeah, I'm with you. When you look at that position, I don't think the Browns value it. I know they don't value it like a lot of people do, especially a lot of fans, a lot of people on the outside. You might need 3 linebackers to play the Ravens and Steelers, and I get it. The Browns play them twice each a year. But you're right. They're going to play – I don't know what the number is, Dave. Is it 60? Is it 65, 70% of their snaps? with one or two linebackers. I don't think that's an exaggeration. And I think they feel like they have two that they love, and then they'll see what they have in Devin Bush. And, you had a couple of young guys last year, undrafted guys. So I don't feel like that's a pressing need. Yeah, I think they should draft one just to add to the pile. But I don't see any real urgency there.
All right. This is ranking the NFL's most productive 2023 rookie draft classes from Pro Football Focus. They go Texans number 1. They had the first and second draft, so I would hope they were. First and second picks in the draft. Packers 2, Rams 3, Browns 21. So DeJuan Jones, Cedric Tillman, Ronnie Hickman. Those are the rookie classes. I get the 21 ranking, but keep in mind they didn't pick until the third round. They got a pretty good, and then you got Hickman, who played well as an undrafted rookie free agent. So if you want to say they're 21st, okay, but for where they picked, they did pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think 21st, they'd probably take 21st given, they didn't make a pick until the third round, right? And again, you got to give it time because Siaki Ika, right? I mean, he's a third round pick. He hardly played last year. So I'm sure they envision a bigger role for him this year. And if he produces like they think he can, or even if he's part of that rotation, then that draft class looks better. Cedric Tillman, I would expect him to have a bigger role this year, or at least, he played a lot last year, but make a bigger impact in year 2. I saw enough that I think there's a chance that he develops into something. I can't guarantee that, but I think there's a chance. And then you mentioned Jones, right? That's obviously the best pick from that draft. Tillman was undrafted but had an impact. So, yeah, I thought, without Jones, we're probably looking at that class as being a bust, at least through 1 year. But with Jones, I think that adds to it, and I think there's even more potential for that class to improve.
So this from Doug Poundaley, ranking the Browns' top second-round picks of the last decade, and they're pretty good ones. So number 1, they go Nick Chubb. He was the 35th pick in 2018. Number 2, Joel Bitonio. He was the 35th pick in 2014. Number 3, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was the 52nd pick in 2021. Number 4, Grant Delpit, 44th pick in 2020. Mitchell Schwartz, 37th pick in 2012. When you look at those are pretty good picks. So the fact that the Browns have a second-round pick, Chubb an All-Pro, Bitonio an All-Pro, Delpit and Owusu-Koramoah, both Andrew Berry picks, ascending pretty significantly last season.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I mean, obviously that spans, the last decade. You got about 6 GMs in there. Ray Farmer picked Joe Bitonio, right? And I remember sitting down with Ray the week after the draft, and obviously that was the Johnny Manziel year, and talking about Manziel, and he said if Dallas was not going to trade up if they couldn't have traded up to take Johnny, or they would have just taken Bitonio there, right? If somebody had taken Johnny first, they would have just taken Bitonio at the end of the first round. That's how much they liked him. And, Farmer's obviously short tenure here, had plenty of negatives, but, landing Joe Bitonio, potential future Hall of Famer, is really good for him. I mean, that's a strong thing on his positive side for Ray Farmer. My only quibble with that list is I think Mitchell Schwartz should be higher. I know JOK played really well last year. So did Delpit, and there's reason to believe that they're going to continue to get better. Andrew Berry's drafts look better with how JOK and Delpit played last year. There's no doubt about that. But Mitchell Schwartz was really good when he was here. He played really well after he signed with Kansas City. I thought they should have kept him. That was part of the whole Sashi Brown letting guys go when he took over. I would have had Schwartz third on my list.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it's more likely that Andrew Berry trades up or trades back this year with that second round pick?
Yeah. I would always say trade down. I think that's how they're built, their philosophy, number one. And we talked about where their roster is. And you can look at that both ways, right? The roster's pretty set. So, hey, let's go chase a guy that we really like. But I also think it's, hey, we don't need to force anything. We'll take the best player if he's at 54, or we'll take the best player at 78, and we can get more picks or get another player, whatever that trade down scenario would be. So I would go trade down.
You know what? That whole philosophy of drafting, it's nice. That's what good organizations do. I think the Browns have finally gotten to the point, and we wouldn't have said this several years ago. They're a good organization at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're really smart, right? And you can criticize that, and maybe they think they're too smart, and they think they can outsmart people. But I believe, like at the core, they think through everything. Their philosophies are sound. They understand that the draft pick or the draft is a crapshoot, right? And you're better off with more picks. And I'm sure most people in the league believe that to some level, but not always follow it. And I think over time, Paul DePodesta and Andrew Berry will follow that philosophy. Doesn't mean they won't ever trade up. We've seen them do it. But I think more times than not, they trade back. I think what's interesting is that, okay, you need as many picks as possible, and those are valuable. But Andrew Berry also, he keeps telling us about a stat where, once you get past a certain pick in the draft, it's really hard to get a player that contributes a lot and can turn into a starter. So when he gets those 4th and 5th round picks, he winds up using those more in trades, like for Amari Cooper, like for Jerry Jeudy. And it's interesting because I think there's way more value in using the picks that way than in just drafting a guy in the 5th or 6th round.
Scott Patrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, how have the Browns done under Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry? We'll take a look. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Patrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. So since 2020, under Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, Browns are 24-10 at home, including an 8-1 record in 2023. The 24-10 record surprises me, Scott. The 8-1, I knew because it was top of mind. 24-10, in the NFL, you have to win at home. You win at home and you split on the road is kind of how you end up as a playoff team. That's how you end up with 10 wins.
I think Stefanski's done a real good job at that. He's obviously embraced the dog pound in the stadium and all that. It helps when your roster's better. That helps you win home or away. But it's a great recipe for success. And, you know how the NFL, David, we focus every week if something's bad, that's all you can think about. So when you had those 2 years where you missed the playoffs, it felt like, oh my gosh, things are terrible. But they weren't as bad as they've been, right? So then those two that helped them bounce back to last year, they had the base in 2020. There's been a lot of really good things that the Browns have done, right? They only have the one playoff win, but I don't think that diminishes how stable they are right now. And, I think the reason for optimism moving forward, and that's, a lot of that is Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski.
All right, so this is how teams have fared in the AFC North since 2020. Again, we're taking it a step further. So the record in the division, in the AFC North, Steelers 16-8. Browns have the second best record in the division since 2020. That surprised me. 12-12. Ravens are 11-13. The Bengals are 9-15. Now Burrow has been banged up. Overall records: Ravens 42-25. Steelers 40-26-1. Browns 37-30, and you see the Bengals record. You also see the playoff record. Bengals getting it done in the playoffs. Browns with that one win. Steelers 0-3. But again, it just kind of further illustrates, if you can win games in the division, that's the first step towards winning. Now, the Browns haven't won the division. You win the division, you get a home playoff game, then things in that playoff record start to change. But again, I was surprised that the Browns had the second best record in the division. And I was surprised the Steelers have the best record in the division.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the Bengals have had some issues versus Pittsburgh, and I think even against Baltimore they've had some issues. But yeah, I'm surprised 12-12. It's positive, and it's weird because you want to view the Browns just like any other franchise, but we've seen all the losing, right? I've witnessed all that up close and personal. So to have an above 500 record over a stretch strikes me as impressive. To be 500 in division, I get it that it's not, if you're talking only Super Bowls and division championships, that's not enough. And I understand that thinking. I also know the context of where they've come. So I think fans should appreciate that growth and that improvement. They still have somewhere to go. They haven't won the division, like you mentioned. I'm not sure they've ever gone 4-2 inside in the division. I know I look that up every year when they have a chance to do it. It feels like they always get stuck at 3-3. But if they could take one more step, right, and get there and win a division, that's when we know the tide would have really flipped.
Yeah, and again, we throw around the culture thing. Before you can get to a winning culture, you have to get where you're not getting your brains. They're at the point where they're not getting their brains beat in, I guess, is where we're at right now. Now can you take it to the next level? This from Dog Poundalia, and I agree with these names. 3 players who could be nice surprises for the Browns in 2024. Number 3, Muhammad Diabate. Again, that's an undrafted rookie linebacker, and he's interesting. He might be the guy that is that next linebacker. Number 2, Giovanni Ricci. That's a tight end fullback that the Browns signed as a free agent from the Panthers. More of a fullback probably than a tight end. And number 1 is Alex Wright. And I don't know about you, Scott. I thought he took a step forward under Jim Schwartz last year. You had to be, if that's what you want to see from a guy in year 3, when you draft them and you're kind of as a developmental guy.
Yeah. I mean, first, Diabate, right. I think he's in that group. We talked about linebackers earlier. He's one of those guys that could step up. I thought Alex Wright, we focused so much on JOK and Grant Delpit, rightfully so. But I thought Alex Wright made a huge jump from year 1 to year 2. At the end of year 1, he didn't have a quarterback pressure or quarterback hit. And he played a bunch, and I just remember thinking to myself, does this guy have a future? He didn't feel twitchy enough to me. But last year he showed up, and he showed up a lot. And he's got the body type where you can play him at end against the run. You can move him inside to tackle on third down. And he's a big body, can do some things, can disrupt. We've seen him bat down passes. I don't know if he's ever going to be a number 2 defensive end in this league. But he's in that rotation, and he can have an impact. I was really impressed with him. And I remember talking to him, and one of the things that stood out was just the caliber of offensive linemen that he went up against in the NFL compared to at UAB was night and day, right? I think he went to UAB.
Yep.
Was night and day, and it took him a while to adjust to that. And I think he finally got a sense of comfort in year 2.
All right, before I let you go, as you look at this Browns roster right now, who's somebody that you could see taking a big leap, a breakout year, if you will, next season?
Yeah, I don't know. Tell me if this qualifies. Is Jerry Jeudy? Is he too established? But he's a guy. Okay, then he's a guy, right? If 972 was his best yardage career or best yardage season in Denver, could I see him getting 1250 with the Browns? Yeah. I think he's that kind of potential. I think Amari Cooper's going to have a big influence on him. Hopefully, for the Browns' perspective, he has stability at quarterback and a good quarterback that can get him the ball more often. So he would be number one on my list just because I don't know if there's a ton of candidates. But so he'd be at the top of my list.
Yeah, and the thing is, if he performs like that, you got to think this offense can be the up. If he performs like a higher end number 2, doesn't have to be a number 1. The upside for this offense is what both the Browns front office and Browns fans want it to be.
Oh yeah, because then you're pairing him with Amari Cooper, David Njoku, what we assume is going to be a solid run game, right? And that's the makings of a big-time offense, right? When you get that third weapon, and then Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman, they become, third, tertiary thoughts, which is maybe where they should be. But if you have guys like that aren't counted on but can still have big games or still contribute in big situations, like I'm sure the Browns would want Elijah Moore to, then that's when an offense can really take that big step.
Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Always really good Brown stuff. Brownzone.com on the internet. He is the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well. We're going to continue talking Browns. We take a quick time out. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us. Sports for CLE. He'll be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. So take a look at this. These are wide receivers with less yardage than Jerry Jeudy in 2023 that are making significantly more money. Deontay Johnson, $18.3 million. T. Higgins, $21.8 million. Cooper Kupp, $16.7 million. Jeudy, 25 years old. High floor. Extension that he got is pretty. It's a pretty good move given the expensive wide receiver mark. Now, Higgins and Kupp and even Johnson all banged up, so that might be the reason that Jeudy had more yardage. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik, Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, price of wide receivers, price of quarterbacks, price of edge rushers, it's only going up.
Yeah, I mean, we've, like I said, talked about in the past, we've seen the wide receiver position really become a premium position in terms of compensation, in terms of, just value to a game. And, you're talking $14-15 million for a receiver. That's pretty good money for a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who, while he hasn't quite lived up to his status as, a top 15 draft pick, he's at least been solid. And I think he's got a chance to flourish in this offense. And you look at those three receivers mentioned, the only one of the three that I would probably take right now long term, I'm talking more than like 3-4 years, is T. Higgins, because Deontay Johnson, he's been inconsistent through most of his career, and Cooper Kupp is going to be 31 later this summer. So you're looking at Jerry Jeudy, 25 years old, still room to grow as a player, I think.
All right, this from Doug Poundaley. 3 AFC North free agent moves that should terrify Browns fans. Number 3, Mike Gesicki, tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. Number 2, Justin Fields, quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 1, Derrick Henry, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. Let's start with Gesicki. You give a tight end to Joe Burrow that's more of a wide receiver hybrid. Yeah, that's, especially with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I kind of figured it's like kind of replacing Tyler Boyd in some ways with Mike Gesicki, and he's a guy I've always loved coming out of Penn State. Just an incredible athlete. He's been he's been productive throughout the NFL. Certainly the best tight end I think that Joe Burrow's had. I think when it comes to the Bengals, Joe Burrow's health is priority number 1, keeping him healthy, because if he is, then now you still have those great weapons of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and then you throw in another solid weapon like Mike Gesicki, you could bring some matchup issues. It just means Bengals are obviously not going away anytime soon. Yeah,
and they added another tackle, so they signed Trent Brown, so they're trying to protect their investment in Joe Burrow. Justin Fields, I said this when they were talking about taking Caleb Williams. I think he's in a really good spot with Mike Tomlin and now Arthur Smith. He might not start week 1, but he's going to be the quarterback there, and I think there's a lot of upside with Justin Fields.
No question about it. I think he's, up until, the end of last season, I think, we saw that the Bears really didn't have a lot to surround him with compared to what obviously they're going to surround Caleb Williams with. Now they have Keenan Allen. They have, the 9th overall pick as well, in a draft that's incredibly deeper receiver. And, the Steelers, I think they still have questions at the skill positions. Obviously, George Pickens, a very talented receiver. Jalen Warren, a very good running back. Pat Fryermuth's good at tight end. But I with Justin Fields, it's a little confusing to me, more so that they brought in Russell Wilson, because I think if you just bring in Justin Fields by himself, he could be the week 1 starter. He probably would be, because he could start for a handful of teams, I think, and still be very productive. I'm pretty high on Justin Fields. So to see that he goes into Pittsburgh as a backup is kind of bizarre to me. I feel like, maybe he should have come in as QB1, but I think with Russell Wilson falling into their lap, just trying to keep the Steelers in a competitive position where they want to keep pushing for the playoffs in a deep AFC North. I guess from that perspective, I can understand their thinking, but no question right now, Justin Fields seems like the first long-term possibility for the Steelers at quarterback.
The other one is Derrick Henry, and I know there are some people that think he might be a little past his prime. I think if you pair him with Lamar Jackson, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a long day for your defense.
Well, even if Derrick Henry's at 85% of himself, you put him with Lamar Jackson, you don't need to be 100% Derrick Henry to look good, and defenses are getting distracted with the threat of Lamar Jackson running the football. And obviously Lamar had that great season a year ago. And, we saw how productive guys like Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and Keaton Mitchell could be, as kind of the second running option in that, Baltimore offense with Lamar Jackson there. Then all of a sudden you put one of the best running backs of our generation, Derrick Henry, next to him. He's not what he was, in Tennessee, when they had that great playoff run. I think it was in 2019 to get to the AFC Championship game. He's not as good as he was back then, but, he's still productive and behind in a great Baltimore scheme. Again, when you have a quarterback that could take attention away like he never had in Tennessee, I think Derrick Henry, that's not a long-term thing, but, for a Ravens team that lost a lot of good defensive players this offseason, this is a good way to compensate. Just get an elite running back. You may not need him long, but, just for one good year of Derrick Henry might be all they need to get to really challenge again atop the division.
All right, let's turn our attention a little bit to the draft. Let's start. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver from Georgia. Now, this from Sharp Football Analytics. Size may archetype him into a slot role in the NFL, but he can thrive there. Yards per route run, 3.26, fourth best. Yards per route run in slot, 3.59. Sixth best, 31.3 target rate in the slot. Third best, yards per route run versus zone. Second best, missed tackles forced, 30%. Seventh best, those are all NCAA metrics for McConkey. What do you think of McConkey? I like him. I don't think he'll probably be gone early in the second round, is my guess.
Well, for a spoiler, I've got a mock draft coming out, and I actually have the Chiefs taking 37, passing over Xavier Worthy, because I think, Ladd McConkey is a player that, is going to be frustrating for teams to play against, because I think, he can fit in that slot role, but I think there's more Tyler Lockett to his game when it comes to Ladd McConkey. The biggest thing is hands are tremendous, and he really gets up the top speed incredibly quickly. He's fast, but he can, shift up in gears, downshift. He's fluid, all those sorts of things. Just the kind of weapons you want, the tools you want to see in a receiver, no matter how big they are. Can they move in different directions? Can they be fluid, change directions? Because as we know, football's not a straight line game, and I really I'm a big Ladd McConkey guy. Obviously the Browns are probably not going to have a shot to get him. I'd be stunned if he makes it outside the top 40 in this draft. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's a first-round pick. I'm very pro Ladd McConkey because he's a guy, I think that teams are recognizing based on, where all the prospect rankings are and whatever, that, obviously, he didn't put up a lot of big numbers at Georgia because in that offense, there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Georgia offense. They're a run first kind of football team. They had Brock Bowers, so you're not going to get a lot of all the opportunities with Brock Bowers there. But I think McConkey's got a chance to be a far more productive pro than he was a college player.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll continue talking draft. Who are some people that the Browns should be looking at 54? Tim's written an article about that. We'll talk about that and more when Sports for CLE returns. Stay with us.
Holy Buckeye! You are looking live at the new #1 sports card show in Cleveland.
Don't miss the Great Lakes Collectors Convention presented by Grady Sports Cards, where the passions of sports fans and collectors collide. April 5th through the 7th at the Independence Fieldhouse. Hundreds of tables of ball card bliss, card show live theater, celebrity appearances, kid-friendly games, ComC Consignment Center, and so much more. Great cards, great location, great show. For more information, visit GradySportsCards.com.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. This from Jack Duffin. This is the last time the Browns selected each position first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. Cornerback, linebacker, 2021. Offensive tackle and safety, 2020. Quarterback, guard, running back, 2018. Edge, tight end, 2017, wide receiver 2016, defensive tackle 2015. Just kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of the position groupings. And Tim, it's not a surprise. When you look at that, Andrew Berry has said they value, I guess linebacker's a little bit of one, but they value cornerback and they value edge and offensive tackles significantly.
Yeah, and I think the thing that, I see out of that, even kind of going on my own quick research a little bit, looking at the last 5 drafts, the first 2 picks in those drafts, I know obviously the last 2 years they haven't picked in the first or the second round. So if you look at the first 2 picks the Browns have taken in those drafts, only 2 of those 10 players have been offensive players, and only 1 of those has been a skill player. That was Cedric Tillman last year, their first pick. So clearly, it's 6 of the 8 for Andrew Berry. It's clearly been a philosophy that they've really tried to address defense, and you can see it with the talent that they brought in on that side of the football. Grant Delpit, J.O.K., Greg Newsome, and then, Martin Emerson, Alex Wright seem like, young players that are coming along. Emerson's already more established, but Wright seems like he's coming along a little bit. That's why I keep feeling like in this draft, this would be a good time to kind of emphasize a little bit of offense, trying to get some good young inexpensive offensive talent in this on this offense. We keep talking about receiver, potentially running back. Maybe it's a good year also to consider, starting to get younger guys into that offensive line, especially in the interior, to kind of create a succession plan, because like I said before, Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, they're not getting any younger. You want to prepare for that just in case, and you kind of want to prepare, a couple years out ahead, as opposed to, having a situation, where one of them may have a significant injury and has to miss a bunch of time. Just have a guy ready to go, and in a couple of years, maybe they take over as a starter.
So I know you've written an article. Let's look at pick 54, 2024 draft prospects that the Browns would be worth looking at if they keep that 54th pick. So you gave me a wide receiver, Keon Coleman, Florida State. What do you like about him?
Well, let me preface this by saying, I've said before that I think the Browns really should trade down because they only have 5 picks, 2 in the top 150. These are guys that would be reasons for me to abandon that idea if I were the Browns to stay put. So Keon Coleman, well, I to me, of these 3 guys is the first one that comes to mind on me. He was a guy that really, did not run well at the combine, a 4.61 40, only a 1.62 10-yard split. So there were some questions, about his speed, but then you watch him play and he plays much faster on the field than the 40 time. He's got great size, 6'3", 213, outstanding hands. You watch his highlights, makes a couple of amazing one-handed catches, and he is very fluid in the open field, which for me is a big thing. Like I've said before, football's not a straight line game. Can you bend? Can you run diagonal, sideways, those sorts of different things? And I think Keon Coleman could do those things. Mike, the reason he could fall to 54 is, he could get lost in the shuffle of some of these faster guys. Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, Lad McConkey, among others. There's so many receivers in this class, from pick 20 to 60 or 70 that could just go all over the place. Certainly some guys are more likely to go in the first round than others. So Coleman, to me, because of that, slow 40 time, maybe that speed doesn't translate to the 40, would be interesting. And I think that would give me pause on a trade down if a guy like Keon Coleman was there, because we've seen from Deshaun Watson's history, he likes big receivers, particularly, that connection he had in Houston with DeAndre Hopkins.
Another guy that you like, and I've heard a number of guys like this that we've talked to on the show, Adrian Cooper, linebacker, Texas A&M. What do you like about him?
Well, Adrian Cooper is an interesting player to me, and I know people would be like, well, why would you have the Browns taking a linebacker in the second round? It's worth noting, as much as we've said linebacker is not a premium position, Andrew Berry has traded up just once in his first 4 drafts as a GM, and the player he traded up for, a linebacker. So that's why I think it's at least an interesting idea to me. I think Adrian Cooper certainly, has the ability to complement JOK pretty well. Good size, 6'2", 230. Again, a theme for me. He moves really well. He's very good 3-down linebacker. He really was a much better player going downhill last season for Texas A&M, and he has the movement ability and the length to be a weapon in coverage. If you're looking for a linebacker, because just they haven't had that long, they need to see if they can find another long-term option opposite JOK. And if you're going to find that, you need a guy who's got 3-down value, and I think Adrian Cooper's got true 3-down value.
All right, and the third guy, that pick 54 that you think the Browns should think about, at least keeping that pick. Chris Jenkins, defensive tackle from Michigan. What do you like about him?
Stout run defender, and he is an absolute monster athlete. I've talked before about his Turkish getup before. If you want to look it up on YouTube, it is a tremendous display of athleticism. It looks much harder. I described it, when you hold the dumbbell in one hand, you have to stand all the way up and then back down. It just shows the kind of athlete I think he is. 6'3", 305 pounds, already a very good run defender, not quite a good pass rusher just yet, but I think, with defensive tackle being a position where I've kind of said in the past that I feel like it's a position, unlike most others, where it not necessarily a true redshirt season, but it's kind of a pseudo redshirt season. And I think with where the Browns defensive tackle group is, you can work Jenkins in slowly, and he's going to be able to defend well against the run. He's got power. He's got, burst for a defensive tackle. He can hold up blocks and really create disruption in the middle. And you give him that time, off to the side, work behind the scenes to develop those pass rush moves. If he gets those, then you have the makings of a very talented defensive tackle. And I think that's one thing I think the Browns could use is, a good young defensive tackle who can create some pressure on the interior. Because we say 1,000 times, the one place quarterbacks don't want to see that pass rush coming is right up the middle.
All right, before I let you go, prospects that raised their draft stock after their pro day. Malachi Corley, wide receiver from Western Kentucky, versatile weapon, 5'11", 215 pounds, clocked at mid-4.4s in the 40. And then Blake Watson, running back from Memphis, failed to receive an invite to the Combine, ran 4.440. 41.5 vertical, 11-foot 3-inch broad jump at his pro day. Do you think Corley's going to be there at 54 if the Browns are picking?
I'd say there's a chance for that, and the reason I think so is maybe he's a little more raw as a route runner than some of the other guys that could be available in that situation. I've talked before about Troy Franklin. He seems like a guy that could slide out of the first round. Roman Wilson is another guy that could potentially be there, maybe a little more polished than Corley. But I think with Corley, you have a guy who can play a little bit of role right away because he has that Debo build. The ability at 210 plus pounds, to take jet sweeps, short passes, and breaking. You get out of a tackle and all of a sudden you got 5 or 6 extra yards. In the NFL, every extra yard matters. So it's a question of, what can you get out of him now? And is that worth, taking the chance that you may only be able to use him as a gimmick for a little bit before he gets up to speed? And then with Blake Watson, who's a guy that, I kind of watched some highlight film of. He was really interesting to me, some of the plays that I think he had in particular against Navy, which is, fluid, explosive, got up the top speed very quickly. And you mentioned, and all those running backs on that screen that you mentioned, one guy that didn't get listed is Kenneth Gainwell, a guy I absolutely loved coming out of college. And, Watson's got some good productivity. You look at his numbers, 1,500 plus yards of total offense, 480 yards receiving, 1,152 on the ground, 17 total touchdowns. Very productive, and he actually weighed in his pro day. I looked at about 200 pounds, so good size there. I think the concern with him, at least from a Browns perspective, and we know this matters with the Browns, Blake Watson's 24 years old. And I think, maybe that shouldn't necessarily be a disqualifier, and, most teams wouldn't think about that. But for the Browns, we know Andrew Berry tries as hard as he can to avoid drafting those older prospects. So maybe that disqualifies Blake Watson, but if the Browns take him, you certainly have the potential for an exciting, change of pace running back.
Tim Bielik, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. Really good stuff relative to the NFL draft as well as free agency. Check him out, Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.